What's up, YouTube? How you guys doing out there? Welcome back. And we're gonna go ahead and get a long overdue update video for you here today. I'm Perry, welcome. Obviously you can see right off the bat, we made some big changes. And today I wanna talk about, the obvious change in the structure being slightly revised and what led to that, as well as the removal of the sand, and just want to jump into the why. So let's get into that first. So why did I pull the sand? Well, as you know, we got this tank moving very quickly in the beginning. I did so with a dead sand bed, and I did so with rock that was already established. This is what allowed me to quickly cycle. I mean, let's face it, we're not even at the 6 month, 7 month mark of this tank. And, we already have Acros thriving. We've got other corals, the A-cans, so the LPS thriving. Fish are doing well. We're consistent to the amount of fish that are currently in there. Has been consistent for a while now. What happened that led me to this change? I think, when I revisit the idea of sand, I really truly believe that live sand is really good to establish a system. However, there could be pitfalls associated. I think it can help if you're setting up with dry rock, but in my case, I think the live sand coupled with the live rock, I think I would have been better off taking the rock and putting it in the system and establishing this tank right here as a bare bottom, and then eventually getting to the point where I may add sand down the line. So I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about that, of when to use sand, when not to use sand. Obviously it's decorative, it looks incredibly good, it's a great contrast to the reef, as well as the structure is concerned. But if you're into acros, everyone who's done both knows that there's a major advantage to being able to siphon detritus at will. For somebody like me who's a little bit more on the OCD side, it fits better into sort of the controllability factor. And I kind of wanted to talk about where can sand be beneficial and where can it sort of be detrimental. And I think in my case it became detrimental. So the algae was out of control. I had hair algae sweeping all over this reef a couple of days back. You wouldn't believe how I've been able to transition this from looking like it did to looking like it does now in a very short period of time. And I did that just through I don't subscribe to all of this acropora are so gentle and everything's so gentle, and we've got to take this gentle approach with everything. Oh my gosh, if something shifts and a parameter changes, oh my goodness. I mean, let's face it, in this system was going into neglect. I was losing interest, it was algae ridden, and I was questioning whether or not should I just keep this going. And these questions, we get these things right now. Right now is some really weird times out there. And sometimes we might question even the hobbies we love the most, and we may be having a hard time even finding interest in something that came so effortlessly before. And I think you guys know what I'm talking about without really going into any detail on it. I think we can pretty much figure on each and everyone's individual level, someone, if not all, are having some little bit of a weirdness factor going on in their world right now, in their reality. And with that being said, it can easily allow you to dip and allow your energy to dip. In this case, it allowed me to take my eye off the ball as far as the reef is concerned. And I kind of was taking this notion like, man, do I really want to do this or not? And so after giving it some thought, I said, no, let's try something different. Maybe a change is warranted. The corals hadn't declined yet. I had lost a couple, but it wasn't due to the neglect. But lo and behold, they were going to start checking out. Both bottles of A and B were empty, and so the alkalinity and calcium was way low, like in the fives with the alkalinity, like 5.7 or 8, and so it was really low. At that level, they live, but they begin their like slow deterioration. You can see them sort of paling and kind of getting brittly in the tissue. So yeah, so I just decided, you know what, let's just go ahead and we're gonna throw a day at this damn thing. So I did. This is what I did yesterday, and today, as you can see, it does not look like a reef that's been in neglect. It looks like a reef that has not been in neglect, that's in pristine. And it just goes to show that there are no rules in this game of life, and in this game when we're dealing with nature and animals. We can be as scientific and as precise as we think we want to be as far as measurements are concerned, and metrics and data and information, but really what it boils down to is having a connection with the animals and a connection to the reef. And and that was really rooted in me, and I had to sort of check myself and say, no, you just bite the bullet. We're gonna do what we got to do here, and we're gonna get this thing turned around. So how did I do it? Okay, real easy. I removed the sand and I siphoned it all out. And so what I was left with was, rock all over the place. It was a hot mess. Knowing that I didn't want to break corals, and I was able to do this without snapping any corals, I took each individual rock outside and put it out in the sunlight and just started scrubbing with brush on every part of, with a big brush, a heavy gauge brush that might as well have been a wire brush. It was plastic, but I mean, when I tell you I hit the rocks hard, I hit them super hard. I took a razor blade, and old school with a razor blade, and did every inch of this glass with a razor blade by hand. Okay, so like I said, a whole day dedicated to this shit, right? And so as you can see, the algae's gone. It was shredded from the rocks, and this allows the cleanup crew to like sort of come behind. All right, now with it being bare bottom, by taking the sand out, I've removed a variable. Let's talk about that variable. We can't really quantify what that sand is or isn't doing, because it can be beneficial at times, but can also be detrimental at times. So to me, it's one of these things that I would reserve for when your reef has been consistently measuring really in a great neighborhood as far as your bare bottom tank that you've set up is concerned. And I would highly recommend that if you're gonna be sort of setting up like I did with rock that's mature, that you go bare bottom. Now, if we're setting up from the beginning, we have no animals, we're not moving corals over, nothing like that, I would say sand is a great way to begin. And as long as you manage it properly over time, I believe it can be hella good. Okay, like there are some that are very meticulous with their sand, and those are the guys that sort of can do sand long term. Otherwise, if you're not willing to put the energy into the sand, if you will, it can become a nuisance. So I would say if you're going to do sand, do it this way. One of two ways: either do it an inch or less, or do it 4 inches, or greater. I would say into the 6-inch range for a DSB. Not going to be very appealing. That's more of an old school look. So a lot of people probably couldn't really relate to sort of that look nowadays. So with all of that in mind, if you look at the reef, it's a little bit easier to run it bare bottom. Why? If you just crank up your flow, it's a shallow tank. I don't need a lot of power heads to keep the detritus lifted. Keep the power, the power heads moving a shit ton of water, and as random as possible. That's the key, guys. It's got to be random. You don't want to set, both of these are very random flows. So I have an MP10 down bottom left, and then a J-bow cross flow up in the right. And, one's pushing water at a pulse rate over, and one's pushing down beneath, and what it's doing is it's sweeping in the front too, but it's gentler than in the back. And in the back, it's like blowing everything out. And that way the detritus comes out forward into the tank, and it seems to come up where those 8 cans are. It wants to rest up in that area right over to the right there. All right, we'll get in here in a minute and I'll show you. So that's the area where the detritus tends to want to gather for me. And I did this, with intent. Okay, it's a strategy. Running BB or bare bottom, if you will. There's a little philosophy involved here, and the philosophy is let your shit get, below. you want it all out of the display. You want it down below. And it's because that detritus, if it builds, it can really fuel algae growth big time, right? And we don't want that happening, right? We want that stuff out of the display. So we want a meticulously clean bare bottom look, and in order to do so, we want to use things like brushing daily, a turkey baster several times a day. I like to use calcium carbonate to sort of especially during a time like this where there's uncertainty. All this scrubbing, all this change, there's a lot of uncertainty. It adds a little bit of a neutralizer of acidity, and it sort of, calms things down a little bit, buffers, if you will, because, we're going from sand and rocks with algae all over them. 24 hours later, no algae and no sand, right? Protein skimmers running, and it's cranking. And as far as the bacterial method is concerned, I'm still going to do it. But we're gonna revisit that, and I'll probably do an entire video on that because, I think I was dumping way too much bacteria, really putting too much bacteria in, and I think the rock was fully saturated with bacteria. So really, all it needed was food, a carbon source, if you will. And I think by me constantly over putting bacteria into the system, I did cause a bacterial sort of imbalance in the system. And could the sand be contributing factors? I don't know. I know my nitrates were screaming high, and I was getting tired of dealing with that. I didn't want to combat that with water changes, So now, bare bottom, a little bit easier. You're going to drive nutrients really low with bare bottom because, again, you're getting the detritus out. Now, if it goes down below, which it will, there's a sponge to catch the overflow of the water leaving the tank here, and it gets caught up on a sponge and a little filter pad that gets cleaned off with tap water daily. Okay, the sponge stays in place and that doesn't get changed out. And then, I make sure I get every bit of water out of that little, piece of cloth that goes over top. And that's just to get the daily shit out of the system, right? The other stuff that's going through it, it can build in the sponge, and some of the detritus does get down into the sump. That's fine. I'll manage it down there by using a shop vac and periodically taking the equipment and cleaning it. Super easy to do, real easy to get to. So, again, I have a siphon hose here too. And what I did is I took like a 1 liter like soda container, or like, whatever, plastic container. And I took the lid off and used the downspout, and I cut the bottom part off of it, if you will. And what I did is I just shoved filter floss down in it. And then I use a clamp and attach it to the side of inner part of the sump, and then I get an airline hose siphon, or a little bit bigger than that, going, and I can siphon this stuff, any of this stuff from the top through that daily, multiple times per day if I feel like dealing with it, if it's necessary. So, again, yeah, tedious work, but if you're like me and you're a little bit more on the anal retentive side and you're a little OCD, it's not, the juice is worth the squeeze in this case. It really is, because, by getting that detritus out of the tank and getting it down below, that's ensuring that my nutrients aren't building in the lit part of my tank. If they want to build down below in the non-lit part where the skimmer can work at them and, I can periodically remove, so be it. But, again, bare bottom brings its advantages for a system that is a transitional system, or a system that's set up with live rock. I would highly recommend sand be the downstream effect of a tank that is really doing well. Nutrients are very stable, minerals are very stable, and now you just really want to decorate the tank. It's like the final aesthetic play in your visualization of what you're trying to create, right? It's the end step of that garden, if you will. And so, we'll get into some other type of topics, and and I'll share over more videos when I update. Sort of little different things that I like to do that makes life a little simpler. And it may be backwards, it may be ass wrong, but hey, it's just it's something that's a little bit different, and and hopefully it saves you a few bucks. I mean, this tank literally was so under budget. I have another tank that Matt gave me, and I haven't even began to think about what I'm going to do with it, but I know that I have this, idea in my mind about taking philosophies of gardening and applying them over into the reef world, and not wasting water and not wasting nutrition, and really closing the loop on a tank, if you will. And I think it's doable. I think it's doable if the strategy is done properly from the get-go. I think it's completely doable. All right, and what I'm talking about doing here is maybe a little bit of a sponge and mechanical filtration to catch detritus, but outside of that, maybe using a little bit of a refugium, a little bit of a lit fuge to help balance nutrients, and then balancing that by how many hours of light I run the fuge can determine where my set point is as far as nutrients, and hopefully I could dial in a nice Acro tank. But listen, anybody who's had a massive Acro system knows that at some point they become like a garden. They become nutrient depleters. So I want you to start thinking about this as your reef grows. I want you to start thinking about, down the line, do you really need to feed any of these coral foods? Do you really need to trap detritus, or can detritus actually become your friend? And I think in a bare-bottom system, especially when you have younger, smaller acros, they have a hard time catching particles that are particulate matter that's sized, for their digestion properly. And if we can get some of this stuff lifted up in the water column, I can completely see it serving as a food source. I can see the polyps are way more out than they were with sand, and that's just because everything's being stirred up and kicked up, and damn, acros love it. And if you've been doing acros for any amount of time, you know that when you remove the socks and things like this and you stir things up, it doesn't cause a problem in the tank. It actually causes the acros to feed. And other corals do so as well. So more ways to get at this than just one way. I like to show a various different type of philosophies and strategies that we can implement. Again, I wouldn't advise people to do things, as on the extreme that I do. But I have a buddy that I can get these corals to quickly if necessary. And if something goes wrong, then I can always break this tank down as quickly as possible. Not that I'm trying to push the limits here, but I am trying to show that, maybe we sometimes make things a little bit more, we overemphasize things a little bit more than we should, instead of stepping back and just trying to look at this from, maybe a different angle. We might see that, sometimes we're the ones in the way of the ecosystem, not the other way around. I'll leave it with that, and thanks for watching. Long video, long time for an update. Oh yeah, look, to spend 1 or 2 minutes, I'll just quickly go in on a few corals. Some of these corals look a little bit dulled down. They're a little bit browned out, I'm not gonna lie, but the acans look good. Hold on. All right, so right away, this one has puffed right up. And again, I don't have a lot of LPS, but that's a hammer. And I think it's just, look at it, it's gotten all puffy, real pretty looking coral. And we'll just scan sort of the acans first. And, you can see that, we are not, lacking from, just color and health. I mean, look at these things. Look at that. So this one's I like this one. It's it has a little bit of green and gold in it. It's just definitely different. It's got like some sage in it. Definitely cool. Oh man. Yeah. And there's some of that algae on that elk horn. You could see it. So I'm gonna have to get at that tomorrow. And then that's my aquamarine jewel browned out. That's a tenuous browned out. Mr. Neutron just stays yellow. That's that confetti still looking good. But you can see a little bit of brownies. We scan along here. That is, hanging in. That's a Bugatti. And don't worry, I'll get that back to nice. What else here? That's that Pangs Blue Monster, and that's that Stag. I really love that piece. And, you know, that Wild Millie right there, unfazed with what's going on. Brownie, and then Miyagi broke, so I had to kind of re-glue that there. So, yeah, I mean, you know, all in all, guys, you know, what are you going to say, you know? For a neglected tank, something, I mean, if you can see this rock here, it doesn't look like it had hair algae. Shit was all over, guys. Like, literally every square inch of this tank, of this rock structure, all of it just littered. All of these crevices and holes, all of it just full of this hair algae. I brushed the shit out of these rocks, and then I just threw them right in. Then I did a big water change, removed the sand. I basically treated it like a big fat maintenance day, and yeah, man, I stayed with it. I didn't give up, and you know, and that was shit. I started at around 6 in the morning, and I went to around 8 o'clock at night. So yeah, all day. All right, much love, guys. Peace out.